Hello YouTube, I'm back with another set of builds, and this will be 3 builds, and it'll be one for each version of Excalibur that I've found to be the most enjoyable based on that version. And to prevent this video from being two 2 hours long, we're going to sort of rapid fire through these with some just generalizations on why some of those choices are made without getting too deep into the math for it. So to show the first one that I think most people will run and most people will enjoy is one that I found to work really well on just Excalibur Umbra, working around his sentience and some of the new bugs that I've been able to find. And if you've seen my other videos, some of the shorter videos that I uploaded recently, those are, I would highly recommend if you want those bugs fixed, see the forum post, keep upvoting it, such, and maybe they'll actually get fixed because they're new. I haven't seen them report anywhere. The old ones, though, are fixed, which is what this build is based around it, which is using Exalted Blade and then not having it be casted every time you go into Operator. So to show this one, you notice it's very similar to my Wrathful Advance build. Now, you could still use Wrathful Advance in this, but Archon Shards, and that'll be different if you do that. And also some of the Exalted Blade choices. But I would highly recommend trying this if you haven't tried this, and it's Wyrd Scythe on Excalibur Umbra. Now, you can run this on any version of Excalibur just fine. It works really well at buffing all of his abilities, including Radio Javelin. And if you aren't aware, this has a slow, it applies viral and it does damage. And the viral it applies in comparison to something like Nourish doesn't mess with the like elemental weighing of your melee weapon. And it also applies multiple stacks on each target versus the Nourish Subsume version, which doesn't. Or it makes it dependent on your elemental weighing on your equipped weapon. So it's a really good option. I'd highly recommend trying this if you haven't, especially if you don't have Wrathful Advance or Nourish. If you've got Daggeth and you're like, I really don't care for Daggeth, and you fetter to whatever you named your helmet, then I would highly recommend trying this. It's a lot of fun, and it's one of the subsumes. I think it goes under the radar a lot. I've loved it ever since they added Daggeth. Yeah. Standard rest of the stuff. I've been able to figure out that you can free up running something like Arcane Energize. If you've seen some other builds, you don't need to run Arcane Energize, so you can get extra ability strength. The downside to this is eventually throughout the mission, you would want to recast Exalted Blade just to snapshot that increased strength into it. That's a slight minor quality of life. If you don't want to deal with that, then I would say run either Fury. That's nice. The condition for this is basically always up when you're playing the types of builds or the way I play my builds and the way I recommend playing my builds, being like a melee only build. So this you could run, and then let's say if you really don't like the attack speed and you want more attack speed, you could run this. Now, this doesn't buff Slash Dash, and I personally enjoy Slash Dash quite a lot. I think comboing Slash Dash into general melee gameplay is very important and a high quality of life for that. So, but if you're not used to that and you don't like doing that, you don't want to do that, or it's more difficult, like let's say you're on console or controller and it's more difficult spamming abilities half the time, then just increases attack speed. And the attack speed is almost proportional to the increase in strength, depending on how fast your attack speed gets. Getting into the Exalted Blade build. Now, to generalize, the reason I still run sacrificial sets is Condition Overload doesn't buff Slash Dash. I like Slash Dash. And then you don't really get room to put it back in anywhere. And I don't really think it's worth it most of the time because you might only have just two status procs on a target that dies. So half the time you're just reducing your first status procs running Condition Overload, since it's starting at 0 versus starting at 137.5. The other advantage here is that when you're running the 275 version of Sacrificial Steel versus running Galvanized, in combination with a fully stacked Blood Rush, you're getting yellow crits and orange crits, and then if you're running like Cat's Eye, you can actually get red crits on heavy attacks. And that's without running Wrathful Advance. So it's the combination of these two puts you in a different tier of build where you can kind of, I'm not going to say sacrifice some strength and some elemental damage, but you could. What I'll show in my base Excalibur build is like when you don't have these mods equipped, there's the way you just compensate for that is just sending the damage to the moon, like sending the strength and just elemental damage. So we're missing one elemental damage here that'll at least occupy one of those slots, and then you can also just add attack speed. If you don't have Prime Fury yet, because you chose the other options, you have Prime Sure-Footed, but you don't have this one yet, let's say, then I would just run Quickening. Quickening's better, in my opinion, than something like Berserker Fury. Berserker Fury I don't like because it's conditional on kill, and so you run into scenarios like in bosses or if there's downtime, like you go to hit a demolition and there was no enemies between you and them, that demolition unit, now you don't have all your attack speed. So the condition for this I don't think is worth it. I think Arcane Strike is better if you had to choose between this one and this one, or between those two options, and then just increasing your and just to sort of show this, you could run this, but notice how much damage you lose. So that's where I think sacrificing potentially, let's say, that much base damage is probably worth it for the quality of life of not having the attack speed so low. Especially for influence, where like influence, your damage is proportional to how fast you're attacking. I think that slight compromise is there. But as you'll see in my Excalibur Primes setup, you don't need attack speed if you're really only barely ever pulling out Exalted Blade and you're mostly using it for Slash Dash. So I would say this is very very easily between Wyrd Scythe, Nourish, and Wrathful Advance. This is like probably the one build that I would say most people are going to want to run when they play Excalibur, because they want to pull out Exalted Blade and make it go brrr with influence, which is really fun to watch. It's very entertaining. Just nuking the whole map with piercing waves of influence. So I'll show this. This is going to be in all of my builds, just because this is so powerful, especially if you're running Furious Javelin. Furious Javelin scales the clouds on this, and then the clouds are self-sustaining, pulling in enemies with magnetic. If you've seen my other videos, you know there's a reason why I run this. I demonstrated that on multiple videos. If you don't have a Riven, that's fine. Just run Prime Pressure Point. But if you do get a Riven, just make sure it's at least got melee damage on it, because the condition overload's not on this for a reason, because the clouds don't scale off of it. So that's where you just want that melee damage. And if you get a Riven, you can get a +2 Riven. Like, just roll a +2 Riven with melee damage. It's going to scale higher than 165%. So you could have just like what's considered trash as a Riven, and it's going to work better. Like right here, just as an example, a +3 -1 melee damage is higher than Prime Pressure Point. So like pretty much any Riven that's got melee damage that doesn't have another second, any +2 is going to be better than Prime Pressure Point. So if you really like Dual Ichor and you've really found yourself enjoying how I demonstrate it, and you plan on using it on Excalibur as like a secondary melee option, even on this build that's primarily an Exalted Blade build, just get an unrolled one, throw some Kuva at it, and then at least get melee damage, and it will be objectively better than just Prime Pressure Point. I have other builds going over the reasons for a lot of these choices. The only thing I'll point out is Sharpening Claws. When you're not running Affliction, not running an Affliction build with Impetus, I switch between these two. I have different builds on my Smita, because my Smita is one that I use on some of my other builds. So that's kind of the swap between those. You switch these two out, and you're good to go. Going into the Archon Shards that I almost forgot to show, I added this one for good reason. So because we're not running Wrathful Advance, sort of adding just this 15% is adding another multiplier. And in most of these games, the general rule on most of these games, instead of sending one multiplier to the moon, like let's say your crit chance and crit damage, that can work, and that can get you to like an extreme damage tier. The other option is that if you can't do that and you've got like less of that, you add more. So instead of sending one to the moon, you just add more multipliers. And this is an example of adding a multiplier, because you're going to be applying electric status on everything around you in sight with an influence build. So at least one of these, I would say, at least one. This max energy on fill, this is a specific thing with Umbra and the way his Spectre works, that his Spectre has starting energy. This fundamentally changes how likely he is to decast Exalted Blade while you're in a Spectre, when he is a Spectre, because he's less likely to drain through his energy by the time you actually transfer back in. So Highly, highly recommend having this on Umbra by default, and it really helps make this build really fluid as well, since you're not really maintaining anything other than having Exalted Blade drawn, and then maybe having Furious Javelin stacks up. This is your filler. So if you wanted, if you couldn't get all 4 of these in, and or if you had, or all 5 of these in, and you had something that you really particularly like, this is kind of the filler. This is going to outperform like strength in this sort of build when he's at 100 and some plus. He's always critting, so that's just going to be good. Sort of the idea of like sending this one a little bit higher than, I guess, adding more strength in this scenario. So this is what I recommend. Effectiveness of energy orbs. You can run one of these. Like, let's say if you don't feel like you're getting enough energy in this build, it doesn't run Blind Rage, so it's not really that hungry, especially with how little Wyrd Scythe costs versus like Nourish. If you didn't think you're getting enough energy in this build, then just use another yellow in this slot. And then pretty much in all of my Excalibur builds, I run casting speed because it really helps. Just one. Now, there's another, my Prime build, I'll show you why I run 2, but that's beside the point. So, if you want to just like a build that's easy to get, that doesn't require Wrathful Advance, because Kalervo is kind of nuts to farm unless you're just buying him with Platinum and then subsuming him. This is a really good one. I think Dagoth is pretty easy to farm. You can even have someone else. You don't even need the resources to be able to do it, to spawn her or go to her mission. Like, someone else can basically carry you there, where they can give you the beacons. There's probably a lot of people that bought too many like me of those beacons. So a really good option. I really enjoy this. It doesn't just buff your Slash Dash and your Exalted Blade, it also buffs your Radio Javelin, so it makes your Radio Javelin like surprisingly effective, even in Steel Path, like against armored Steel Path enemies. Okay, so that's Umbra, and you can obviously run this build on any version. I just think the way Wyrd Scythe synergizes with his Sentience is just, it feels really good. Like, it doesn't break stuff. So, we'll get into my basic Excalibur build, which, I guess trigger warning, he's fully Omniformed as well. But the nature of this build is, well, how can I simplify Excalibur down to just basically Slash Dash and Exalted Blade? And that's Precision Intensify, which applies to Exalted Blade, obviously, as your 4th ability, but it increases the damage of Slash Dash because Slash Dash scales its damage off of this. I verified this as well. This isn't something I'm assuming. Now, getting deeper into this, you just send you send the Strength of the Moon. This isn't as high as my other build that I'll show. For those that might have seen my other build, one of my bug videos, where I was over 1,000% strength on Prime, but this sends it to the moon. And the only downside of this is it's very energy intensive, and that's why I got rid of Radio Javelin and why it's not running something like, you can't even see it here, but Furious Javelin. It's very costly with how low Excalibur's base energy is. Who this build is for, I honestly don't even know, but if you wanted to run this build on like Prime, or like if you're on Prime and you don't have any Umbra Forma, then I would say this is a pretty decent option. Or if you just want a really simple build, Adaptation, if you have a preferred defensive mod, like if you like Rolling Guard, or if you want to run something else, then go for, I think, Adaptation and Brief Respite. Adaptation does proc while you're in Slash Dash, so if you're Slash Dashing in this build for defensive purposes, then it's a really good option there. Now, it's not going to protect you at level cap. You have something else entirely different that you need to use for level cap, which is why this build runs Unaru. And getting into this, so contrary to what I was showing with Umbra, where I was running Umbra mods that got his crit chance to be reliably above 100%, because this build doesn't run Narman, and because this build runs Unaru, you really can't, I don't think it's worth relying on 12 by 220 combo in order to scale the crit chance and the damage in that way. So that's where this build doesn't have, it basically doesn't care about crit chance to an extent. So the way around that is, because the strength is really just sent to the moon, you can fill in those spots by just adding as much elemental damage as you can and using Prime Pressure Point instead of Condition Overload. And then also, because you have those extra mod slots, you can run, and I specifically didn't use Arcane Fury in this build because I wanted to keep this away from this Excalibur build from any daily login rewards. It's part of the idea. Like, if you saw my base Excalibur, my beginner friendly, this is the evolution of that beginner friendly one. This is where I was like, okay, well, I made that. Let's make a full send, which is why this also has Archon Shards, being same one as I showed on Umbra. I think it's worth at least having one of these. Energy Orb Effectiveness, you're going to need it. Just 1 strength. This is the filler. If you wanted a 3rd Energy Orb Effectiveness, I don't even know if that's worth it, because I think you'd be almost regenerating your entire energy pool. 420, you'd be getting like 200 and some energy per orb. That might not be worth it, but if you needed to, you could. And then casting speed. All of my builds run at least like 145% range and casting speed because I'm used to that. Slash Dash doesn't feel right using as mobility or even just connecting without that. So this really isn't as necessary in this build. If you wanted to free this spot up, you could do that, because if you're not really using Slash Dash that often, there's really nothing else that's scaling it. Maybe this, but the range, the base range on this is high enough to where it's not really an issue. And no one cares about slide blind radius. It's never been good. So arcane slots are questionable here. These are just cheap and easy to get by today's standards. So they scale really well, just increase damage and attack speed. So the attack speed on this build feels really good. It turns out nothing can attack you if they're all convulsing from being shocked. And I haven't touched this one at all. This is basic. Still a 0 investment, just max fraying. Really good backup option, because technically if you wanted to have this on this build, let's say you're a new player and you wanted to use this, then you at least buff Slash Dash, because you're not maintaining combo anyways. So then if you're running this, you're at least getting 10x increased, 10 times 25% multiplicative damage on Slash Dash, because this is going to maintain. Like, let's say if you don't have Exalted Blade out, that would be the scenario for it. But that's the not Prime build that has been upgraded with Prime mods. And same for this. If you don't have Prime versions of these mods, just downgrade them to the normal version, like Continuity. Just use the base versions of them. But you probably want to get rid of Blind Rage. If you don't have Prime Flow, don't use Blind Rage. You're just not going to be able to... You're not going to have enough energy to cast anything. So the replacement for some of this would be like Augur mods, and those are nice and cheap. And I show that in my... I think this build. Yeah, this build right here. I kept this one. This is like the low cost sort of build that you can run. You wouldn't need to run Arcane Energize if you have Tau, or if you just have Archon Shards in general. So the other thing to note about this is Empower doesn't apply to Slash Dash unless you cast it first, because the way Slash Dash looks at like the damage it scales based on Exalted Blade. At any given moment when you go to cast Slash Dash, it looks at what your Exalted Blade is. It doesn't care if you have Exalted Blade out, snapshotted with like Empower and a Fissure bonus and Teshin's Ghost thing and the Omni Survival, the one in Lua. Like, it doesn't care about that. So is that worth it though? I don't think it's worth it, because you're probably not maintaining combo anyways, and so you're not getting the multiplicative damage. Slash Dash is sort of more of a feature than a staple of this. And this is still mostly an Exalted Blade build. This isn't really a Slash Dash build. It's not based around another melee weapon. It's really just a, like, if you didn't have Umbra, or if you didn't want to mod or upgrade all those Umbra mods, like you didn't have enough Endo and enough credits to upgrade those Umbra mods, and then you didn't want to nuke your Umbra polarities to be able to compensate for that, this would be the option that you could run on base Excalibur that I think it's really powerful. Like, I've been impressed with it so far of how effective this is. It does require the ways that I survive of using like a bit of shields in order to survive, but adaptation helps quite a lot. A very good mod adaptation up until like, level 400 or 500 enemies. And on this build, I'm just using my Spina. So it really doesn't matter which one between Cat's Eye. And then we'll get into this monstrosity, which is I decided to send Strength to the Moon to really figure out like how crazy does specifically my like Slash Dash, Nourish, dual Ichor's Cloud build get. And if you've seen one of my recent videos where I was I was using in that dual Ichor video that I did recently with the clouds, where I was just showing it like basically AFK, letting it kill everything, and super critical sort of reactor idea. The that was even running a lesser variation of this. So this is an even more extreme variation of this. I was still kind of tweaking with this. So to show that, finally, I found the one scenario where growing power, or let's say not running Brief Respite, is actually better. And it's because you get a little bit of shield. You need this. You need some sort of shields if you're slash dashing when you come out of slash dash to not instantly die. So because we have like all these extra free mod slots, instead of running Brief Respite and then running like something else for defensive, you can basically say, okay, well, I don't need Brief Respite because I get a little bit of shield energy or a little bit of shield regeneration, so that when I come out of slash dash, I don't immediately die, which will happen if you don't have any shields and you slash dash. So that like feature alone is required, I think. Baseline, I think, is required for Excalibur. How you get it, Brief Respite or Augur secrets or Augur mods, doesn't matter. Just sort of a convenient thing. And also when you do the math on this is a good, 49% strength between these two mods, and you give this to your teammate. Now, this build goes up to 530% strength with these conditional bonuses active. So this stacks up to 13 times, and then obviously you get 60% from this, and it's nuts. If you, let's say, had two Umbras, because you merged accounts and you've just got an Umbra sitting there doing nothing that you can't delete, I would highly recommend running this build. The only thing you'll want to do, and this is one of the few builds that I found where Prime kind of has a privilege, but at the same time it's a crutch, because Prime Surefooted isn't needed for this build, not at all. So if you were going to do this and actually run it to the min-max, it would be running this instead, or on Umbra running Warrior's Rest. And the reason for that is, I'll put this back in because I'm using this as a crutch. I really like it, even though it gives me less strength. I'm going to keep using it. It's because you're using Vazarin, and Vazarin is what solves issues that could arise from basically having no survivability other than slash dash on this build. So the nature of this, and I'll argue this to Kingdom Come, when you have like a Steel Path Void Cascade group and you're running the level cap, having someone with Vazarin is very powerful, because you could run into this death loop issue where it doesn't matter how good, if everyone runs Maturai and everything's dying around you, you just have so many enemies that you can't kill the Thraxes in time before your Warframe takes lethal damage just from existing. Like the AoE collateral damage from you being an operator and your Warframe supposedly having like a 99.9% reduction in damage, they'll still die, and then you run into this death loop, and then you get you die anyway. So Vazarin solves that problem. It not only helps you revive enemies faster, but that's when you void sling through a bunch of enemies. The massive downside to switching between these builds is I actually have to change arcanes on my operator in order to like properly run these two builds. So we'll get into this though. We'll finish going. Oh, I already showed the Archon shards. The reason I'm running 2 casting instead of 1 casting on this, even with my 145% range, is because with how little shields you're generating, you can actually run an issue where you're casting Radial Javelin and you don't survive through its cast, because you're not immune when you're casting Radial Javelin. So you use the shields that are generated from casting it at its drain to like survive, and without that extra casting speed, it's noticeable, especially if you're not running Brief Respite. Even running Brief Respite, you can run into this issue. So because you're not always at 45% efficiency, you can have this almost cancel Blind Rage's negative efficiency out. And Blind Rage is required to survive for that. So getting an Exalted Blade. Now, keep in mind, this build in general is what I would consider the slash dash variant of Excalibur, where you're really focusing on just maximizing the damage of Exalted Blade, just like not the damage when you're using it, but just maximizing its base damage. Uh, because where the way I play this build is I only ever pull out Exalted Blade, kind of like what I explained in my other Affliction Impetus build or Gas Affliction build. You're only really pulling out Exalted Blade if you need like status damage variety type, like if something's immune to magnetic or toxin in this case with Dual Ichor. That's kind of the one reason you're pulling it out, or just to bypass some damage attenuation. Since if you notice, without conditional strength, without like potentially at least 120% conditional strength, because you can usually get at least 10 stacks of impetus if you're doing it right. That's how much damage this does by base. It's kind of nuts. If you saw, just putting this in perspective, this is a 367%. And if you look at the not prime build, he's running 374, but his Exalted Blade is like half. And it's because instead of running attack speed, we're just sending the damage to the moon with, in this case, lots of elemental and like spoiled strike, just maximizing the elemental damage and increasing base damage onto him. So, just put this into perspective. That's how much damage spoiled strike gives you. So yeah, it's gonna turn this into a really slow weapon, but it's massive on how much better this is than, like, let's say if you were to use vicious, like the cold mod for this. Like if you were to put this in here, just look at that. Look at, just as an example. So adding this melee damage is really impactful. Yeah, you get the negative 20 attack speed, but you're not adding attack speed. You're not using this. If there's a wisp around you, it doesn't matter if you've got negative attack speed on it. Your attack speed's going to be usable. Yeah, so that's the reason for that. So you're giving as much elemental and melee damage as possible. And the purpose of this isn't really to like do gas damage, so we don't really care for the status chance. Like, yeah, the status chance will be a little bit higher when this procs, but it's not the intent of the build. It's just maximizing the damage and status type varieties. So the gas and the cold, as I explained in my other build, this alone, just having the 60% mod, you don't even need to you don't even proc the elemental effect for it, like an actual status chance for it. You just have to have cold damage for it to proc Archon Flow. So that's why Archon Flow is on this. This is intentional. This isn't just because it's a status build or like a, impetus with afflictions and sort of stuff. Afflictions doesn't proc this. If you have cold and you stack cold with afflictions, it doesn't proc this. The only thing that procs it is if you have cold damage actually on the weapon. And this procs very often. You're getting kills with Slash Dash reliably when you're slash dashing, and you can see this when it goes off cooldown or goes on cooldown. It procs a lot, and when you're running Nourish and you're just, the trick to this and the reason why you don't need energy effectiveness orbs is if you just put the strength to like an insane amount on this, you don't need any sort of other multipliers for increasing your energy regeneration. And this procking off of your companion, just as a representation here or an example, like just your companion procking shot or electric on your target will allow you to proc Archon Stretch by when you knock them down and you stack it with afflictions, and you can an impetus proc for it and stuff. All of that synergy. Another thing I'll mention too is this impetus and affliction sort of synergy does work on at least Atlas, because he does, like, I don't think it's guaranteed, but he has a chance of knocking down targets. I'm not an Atlas player, obviously, but I've tested it at least once and it did work. So if you wanted to use that synergy, then go for it. I don't know if it works on any other former pseudo Exalteds, but it does. And the other thing about this too, and the reason why this doesn't run any Blood Rush or anything like that, is because it's a waste of mod slot. Because of the way Slash Dash's combo works. Slash Dash and its multiplicative damage that it gets, that 25% up to 11 stacks of that multiplicative damage, it doesn't have its own combo counter like the rest of them. DE didn't add its own combo counter, and there's advantages and disadvantages to that. The advantage is if you've got an absolute monster of combo generation, like you're running Toxin Magnetic, which is just, this is just the best form of running dual Ichors on as a general rule, other than like maybe Saren. This right here will give you basically infinite instant and infinite combo. So as soon as you get into combat, if you don't get the 12x220, you didn't need 12x220 to actually kill whatever you're trying to kill. So then it's like a self-correcting issue. And then the fact that it also gives you extra combo duration, so you don't have to mod in any sort of combo duration. Sure, you could use dexterity mods and really help improve that. I don't run them because I like getting those melee or strength bonuses from fissures. If you didn't know this, you only get fissure bonuses based on what you have equipped. So if you don't equip a primary or secondary, you don't get primary or secondary infinite damage or infinite ammo and increased damage. You only ever get melee damage, which buffs this build entirely, or you get the double strength, double range, which buffs this build entirely. So it's a way of, it's one of those sort of pro tips that I found over the years of, and it is very impactful. Some of my builds kind of rely on, like, that 200% strength build, it's noticeable when you snapshot in to 400% strength instead. Or in this case, it would be like 524 or whatever when it's fully ramped up. And then obviously the status chance mod, or status chance evolution for it. So same idea. This is just my specific unicorn ribbon version of it. Same lower attack speed, which I actually prefer. And this is like only 8% better than running, let's say, like crit damage, like a little bit easier obtain ribbon. But same principle applies. You want melee damage. This is just a better version of, for me at least, of this mod, which I had this ribbon even before Jade Shadows. I've had this for a long time, and because I've been running this kind of build for a very long time. This makes that ribbon kind of obsolete, but not really. This scales better when you run it in this kind of build by like a good amount, actually, unfortunately. But just run this instead. So I've already shown that. The idea behind that build is you do need Vazarin in order to survive. So I'll only show one gameplay of for these builds, just to not have this video be infinitely long. And let's see, is this fissure still up? Yeah, we won't run that. Go to our standard test. And I'll show Wyrd Scythe and kind of why I like Wyrd Scythe on this setup.
Each enemy is
so example here is, just in case you didn't know about this, you get double combo generation when you do this, as it's stating. And the way I do it, bullet jump up, operator, look down, and then I have to quick melee to do it reliably, because on glaives and stuff it doesn't do it unless you quick melee, even though I use the left mouse button override inputs.
Hold on. I'm sending auxiliary.
What I like to do is at least proc this for the extra attack speed, or the extra movement speed. And so even if you're just running dual Ichors, you know, technically this still buffs it. Like, you can kind of help this build with just Wyrd Scythe as well. So it's not just specific to this. Just not specific to like influence Exalted. So just a demonstration of dual Ichors working in this build with only 200% strength, just fine. Alright. Now to the actual build itself. The other advantage of Wyrd Scythe that I didn't mention, but kind of forgot about for a while there, is if you can cast it before you slash dash, and then you start slash dashing while it's still on. So that's been always a good feature of it. That's where I liked it back in the day as well, because it would help kind of CC before slash dash had shield immunity. Kind of help your slash dash a bit there. Make sure you get your double proc there for combo, because we're going to need to generate some combo there. I'll show this real quick too. Let's say you pop out, notice how it decasts, but he will actually cast it. And so, like right here, you notice, well, he died there, but we'll show it. So like I said, it decasts it. Here's another bug that I hope they fix. I've reported this. Exalt Blade doesn't work at all in the proper way when he's when he's in his Spectre form. If they fix that, call Excalibur Prime obsolete. He won't matter anymore by a lot because you'll have Mr. Influence here just nuking the map, which I hope they do. Please make Excalibur Prime obsolete. So here, I'll see if I can demonstrate it. Get rid of some of these enemies. So he's gonna cast it, but notice it doesn't apply any. It looks like it applies the slow. Oh, right there. Okay, so if he hits the enemies with it, it does actually apply viral, and so he'll cast that. I feel like that's so useful in comparison. So his Spectre can actually do a lot more work because he's applying viral as well, and a slow in this scenario. What I'll show here next as well that I've mentioned is when you cast this, you kind of want to time it. Like I didn't do it there, just as a demo. But if you cast this, let it hit, and then use your Radio Javelin, it does decent damage. Like it's more. I think it's more noticeable when I get double strength relic bonuses, but or when you get like the extra crit. I'll even show this here. We'll wait until we get Cat's Eye. Oh no. There goes our Exalted Blade. So let's see if I can show this with Cat's Eye up. See right there. Didn't wait for it to cast. Right. See some crits. Try not to drain all our energy there. It's very noticeable when you get the charm buff for it. Maybe a little bit harder to see with Cat's Eye, but try not to nuke all of my energy spamming Radio Javelin. But it does. It applies. That 60% applies. Same thing with Arcane Avenger. That's obviously not worth it in a scenario versus just like a preset or an ability on your Kavat.
Additional life support has arrived.
So even after draining all my energy, I still am maintaining an energy economy. Wyrd Scythe is just really efficient in that way, with it only being 25 and being very powerful. I think Wyrd Scythe is very efficient for its energy economy. Like it's a very capable ability for only costing 25. You see there, like between my companions and Radio Javelin, it's actually killing enemies.
This will help
So.
our cause. Extraction is available if you need it.
Right there. So the trick that I sort of mentioned before, maybe I didn't complete this thought, is if you're casting Wyrd Scythe, you want to wait until after it actually hits enemies for you to Radio Javelin, because then you get that extra health damage that they take from being afflicted by viral. Like, look at that. Pretty good. A lot better than not running it. You see that? 5-6 stacks. It just feels really good. I'm using the same keybind setup where I scroll down, just like what I do with Grapple Advance. I have alt keybinds for abilities on my mouse. It gives you a little more options. I don't always cast it using the mouse, or cast my abilities using the mouse, but that flexibility in keybinds I think is really useful. Like I'm just muscle memory. I still hit 1 on my keyboard to slash dash. Look at that. 174. And that's not from my companion. Or it shouldn't be. Maybe it was. Maybe I should turn off those numbers when I'm demonstrating this. Alright, so we're going to get out of here. So I think that's a pretty good demonstration. Wyrd Scythe, if you're using it properly, it's a good source of CC, it's a good source of viral, it's a good source of damage. It's just a really I think it's a really fun setup, and it mitigates the problems with Umbra Sentience quite a lot. So if you wanted to run probably the easiest, I would say, to set up build for him because of subsumes with the lowest amount of effort. And this build kind of incentivizes you to want to run to hit radial javelin on a lot of targets because it feels satisfying the amount of damage it does when you combo it with Wyrd Scythe. So it just feels really good overall. So that would be kind of my recommendation. So go back in a little recap for it. Slash Dash. When you run Slash Dash, if you're running like a Slash Dash build, you really want to run Affliction. The best way I found to do it is running this build that I demonstrated earlier. And you can run Raffle Vance with it too, but I feel like this solves so many problems with that Raffle Vance doesn't. Like maintaining impetus stacks, energy economy. You can just send your strength to the absolute moon. You don't have to worry about modding in some sort of increase in energy regeneration in some way, or energy economy. It's pretty much fixed with Nourish. If you give enough strength, it fixes all of your problems when it comes to energy. Except for sorties, when you're energy reduced, then you're kind of screwed. But you don't need any of that when you've got 400% strength, 500% strength. Most people, I think, will want to run this because most people are going to be using Umbra, and this is really good. Just drop in if you want to play melee only and really stretch the legs of all of his abilities, including Radial Javelin. This is just what I recommend for it. And then if for someone this might matter, this build, the not prime build that was upgraded to a primed subsume, easy subsume. It's an easy subsume to get. And I think it's like one of the ones you get by default when you unlock the helmet. So like you just unlock the helmet, you want an option, Empower works really well for that. And then just downgrade these to their normal mods, sort of like what I have here, if you just want to copy that as well. But if you've got Archon Shards, I'd run that high strength version. It's just without running Energize. You can replace one of those with Energize too if you wanted. You can replace one of these with Energize, and you'd probably be fine. But if you got Archon Shards, use them there. So yeah. Been any questions? Anything that you think I'm missing? Any feedback on that? I'm potentially going to start going over some of my specific melee weapon builds because I haven't really covered a lot of those. I've been focusing more on Excalibur and also Dual Ichor because it's the best melee weapon out of all of them by like a mile, but it has its limitations. It's such an extreme. It's like I think Dual Ichor's is as extreme as Exalted Blade is as a melee weapon. Like I think they're pretty much the top two out of all of the melee weapons. If you had like a tier stackage, I'd say Dual Ichor and Exalted Blade are like S+ tier, and then everything else is kind of below it. I have a lot of melee weapons that I spend a lot of time using. They all pale in comparison. The only things that kind of come close is like Skana, Prisma Skana is actually better than Skana Prime, and Hate and like Okina, and Rocket Dark Dagger if you've got the right ribbon for it. So, yeah. Feel free to leave any feedback, and thanks for watching.